All right, how's it going, everyone? So for today's video, I have an older 2500 Ram truck that has no brake pedal. The brake reservoir is completely empty and it's got no brake pedal at all. The vehicle barely wants to stop. I'd show you driving it, but it's a older diesel truck, and with all the low end torque that they have, it's kind of difficult to stop. So there's 2 leaks on this particular vehicle. So I have the left front wheel out, and if you can see up into the corner right there, the piston is actually popped out. Now it hasn't popped out because it's got plenty of pad thickness left. It's got about 7 millimeters of pad thickness. But what's happened is this truck has sat for a while, and the pistons had rusted into the bores of the actual caliper itself, causing them to roll the seal over. And that's exactly what's happened. Is after this truck was put back on the road, it started to leak. The other leak while doing the inspection is right here on this hose. So you can see when I started to activate the brake pedal, it started to leak, and there's a tear right there in the rubber. So that's the rubber overliner, and then you can get the braided line, see a good view of the braided line right there, and it's leaking as well. So what I have to do is I have to replace this caliper and replace this line. Under normal circumstances, I would be replacing all of the 2 front calipers as a pair, and then as well as also replacing both front lines. This customer just wants to get it on the road. He's decided to part ways with the vehicle. So we'll be replacing the left front caliper and the brake line as well. Due to the brake fluid getting onto the pads, it's made the pads to where they're really not usable anymore. So we're gonna have to replace the pads on the right side as well as the left side here. I also noticed too that the rotors, because this is a tow vehicle, have little cracks all in them. So this is a not savable rotor. Thickness wise, this rotor is okay. It could be turned, but with these little cracks all in it, this rotor's a throwaway now. So we're gonna have to replace front pads, rotors, left front caliper, and the left front line, and then go through and bleed the brakes. So we'll do that right now. We got our new components. One of the things to note beforehand, I already went through and ran a little bit of penetrating oil all on the bleeders. The vehicle looks like it's been sitting for a while outdoors, and all of these bleeders are pretty rusted. So I'm hoping that I can, with the penetrating oil, that this will sit for a couple hours while I'm doing the other repairs, and they'll all break loose while I bleed it. So I have a new caliper, new brake line, some pads, rotors, and then also to make sure I'm going to replace the copper crush washers as well while I'm doing the lines. So we'll get to that and hopefully get this truck back on the road. All right, so my first step is going to be to remove the hard brake line from the soft brake line. So the soft brake line comes up into a bracket and it's held on with this little clip, and then the hard brake line comes down from the distribution block down into the soft line. So we need to break this loose. So we're gonna have to back up the soft line. So this is a 19 mil, and then I'm gonna need to use a flare nut wrench, which is this guy right here, to break loose this fitting. Now the flare nut wrench is designed to grab more surface area of that flare, and I'm less likely to round it off. I have hit this with penetrating oil as well, again to try to prevent it rounding. I really don't want to have to make a new hard line. So we'll break this fitting loose, and then we'll pull that clip off, and the line will be free. I really don't have to replace the other end because the caliper is getting replaced, so I'll leave that attached. The penetrating oil has really done its job. This isn't have that much effort. Now at this point, since the fitting is broken loose, I can then switch over to a regular 9/16 wrench. This is really only for breaking the fitting loose. Once it's loose, you can do it with an open end wrench just as fine. All right, so our hard line is free, so now I'll take a screwdriver and pry out on that clip to pop that out, and then the lower line will be free. And this is the clip that retains this guy, just a simple little pop clip. They do get sprung and they need to be replaced after a couple uses, but we should be able to reuse this, and then the line just should drop right out. And now we can move on. So I'm just gonna go through and loosen these two caliper hangers. Because I'm replacing this entire unit and the new caliper comes with a caliper hanger, I just need to remove these two larger bolts that mount it to the steering knuckle. So with the caliper off and on the bench, you can see right here, there's a big old rip in the seal. It's not super clear, you can see on camera. But again, that was because there's a rust line that formed on these pistons inside of the bore of the caliper, and it caused it to pop the seal out. There's plenty of pad life left, but because brake fluid got on this, they need to be replaced as well. And then again, the rotors have all these micro cracks from being overheated so often. So get all the new parts on and prepped, and we'll move on from there. I'm going to torque the caliper hanger bolts to 210 foot-pounds. It's really important to make sure that we install our pad sliders. These are what the inside of the pad is going to slide onto. These need to be nice and clean. If it comes with replacement ones like this that are the somewhat polished steel, you do not need to add lubricant to it. This is enough for those pads to slide. The lubricant can just get on and potentially damage the pads. So we'll install these and we can then install our caliper. They just clip right over as well. Spoke to someone with the caliper. We need to put on the pads themselves first. We can now go through and install our brake caliper. Now, to know that this is the left side caliper, the bleeder has to be at the highest point it possibly can. So if this was the right side, we'd be installing it upside down. So that's how you can tell that you have the correct side brake caliper or not. So we'll get the two slider pins threaded in and then torque this to spec. And we do have to slide the brake caliper under this middle clip, and then it drops down in the middle on that side. And it's really important to make sure that the boot stays on the sliders themselves. Our caliper retaining pin bolts are torqued to 24 foot-pounds. I apologize for how much I'm sweating. I'm sweating like a pig because it's about 110 right now in the shop. And I'm keeping the fan off so that the audio is not terrible on the video. Alright, so with our caliper hangers and our caliper pin bolts torqued to spec, pads in, now we can just add the brake line. Conveniently, I have two sets of new copper crush washers, so if I screw it up, I have an extra set now. But we'll put the line on with the new banjo bolt. The banjo bolt being a special hollow bolt that has these fluid channels in them, because the bolt is hollow. So we'll install this in the new line, and then we'll move on to the other side, get the pads and the rotor on the other side, and then we can bleed the brakes. So with installing the new brake line, again, I have two new copper crush washers. One goes on top, one goes below. These are the sealing rings. These are one-time use. You cannot reuse these. So we have a new set that came with the new calipers plus a new banjo bolt, so we should be set. So we'll thread this into the line port and then tighten up our fitting on the other end. So I didn't realize I screwed up and didn't have the camera running, but I already put the line in. We installed our clip, just slides in. Might take a couple taps with a hammer to get installed. And then we have our fitting back torqued up. We used a backup wrench and the flare nut wrench on the fitting itself to get it tight. You don't have to get it super tight. These are double flares, double ball flares, and you run the risk of if you over tighten this, you can crush the flare down. So you just need to tighten it just a little bit. We also tightened our brake line banjo bolt to 18 foot-pounds per spec. So now we can go to the other side, install the pads and rotors, and then bleed the brakes. All right, so now I got the new pads, rotors, left front caliper, and left line on. So it's time to bleed the brakes. Now I'm gonna start in the left front. Now this isn't technically to book standards, but the reason why I do this is I found if you start at where the fail point was, so in this point, our line and our caliper, and get all the air out of that point, and then restart the bleed procedure and go from the right rear, right front, left front, you'll get the air out a little bit quicker and you won't run the risk of running the system dry. So I've topped the master cylinder all the way up. I have some vacuum line going into a water bottle to collect any of the brake fluid that comes out, and I'm gonna have an assistant in the car pump the pedal 3 times and then hold, and then I'll open the bleeder valve up and we'll push the air out. So if the assistant will pump the brakes. All right, so with the first couple pumps, you can see how aerated the fluid is, but we are getting fluid out right now. With bleeding this left front corner first, we don't run the risk as high of having the system be pushing air through the rear. Now the system are segregated front and rear, so we start with the front and then we'll go back through and do it as a conventional brake bleed. All right, so I got the brakes all bled, wheels are torqued. Now I need to go out and drive the vehicle and bed in the new pads and rotors, and then double check to make sure the hydraulic system's functioning. The vehicle does stop and it's all fine and dandy for the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ship the vehicle and return it back to the customer. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch, and I will see you in the next video.